The shadows of the abandoned hospital. It was a cold, dark night, the kind that made your bones ache and your skin crawl. I found myself standing outside an abandoned hospital, its crumbling facade looming ominously in the dim streetlight. I had no reason to be there, no explanation for why my feet had led me to this godforsaken place. But there I was, alone and shivering, with an insatiable curiosity burning in my chest. The building had seen better days. Its walls were covered in graffiti, the broken windows gaped like empty eye sockets, and the door hung ajar, creaking softly in the breeze. I took a tentative step forward, my heart hammering in my chest. The silence was deafening, broken only by the occasional screech of a distant owl or the rustle of something moving in the shadows. I pushed the door open and stepped inside. The air was thick with dust and the stench of decay. I coughed, my breath catching in my throat as I tried to steady my nerves. The hallway was dimly lit by a single flickering bulb, casting eerie shadows on the peeling walls. I followed the corridor, my footsteps echoing eerily in the emptiness. As I ventured deeper into the hospital, I could feel the atmosphere changing. The air became heavier, the shadows darker. I passed rooms filled with discarded medical equipment, rusty beds, and moldy mattresses. Each door I opened revealed a new layer of horror, a fresh reminder of the suffering that had once taken place within these walls. Then I heard it, a low, moaning sound, coming from somewhere deep within the bowels of the hospital. I froze, my heart pounding in my ears. The moan came again, louder this time, followed by a rasping, guttural laugh that chilled me to the core. I knew I should run, but I couldn't move. I was transfixed, drawn to the source of the sound like a moth to a flame. I followed the sound, tracing it to a set of stairs leading down to the basement. The steps creaked under my weight, each footfall echoing loudly in the enclosed space. The basement was even darker than the upstairs, the only light coming from a narrow window high up on the wall. I could make out the shapes of old hospital beds, rusted and covered in cobwebs. And then I saw it, a figure, huddled in the corner, rocking back and forth and muttering to itself. I inched closer, my heart in my throat. The figure was emaciated, its skin stretched tightly over bony limbs. Its hair was long and matted, hanging limply around its face. As I drew nearer, I could see that its eyes were sunken and milky white, staring blindly into the darkness. It sensed my presence and let out a guttural scream, lunging at me with inhuman speed. I screamed and stumbled backward, tripping over my own feet and falling to the floor. The creature was on top of me, its hands clawing at my face, its mouth snapping viciously at my throat. I fought back with every ounce of strength I had, kicking and punching and screaming for help. But there was no one to hear me, no one to save me from this nightmare. The creature's grip tightened, and I felt myself slipping into darkness. And then, suddenly, it was gone. The weight lifted from my chest, and I was left gasping for breath on the cold, hard floor. I scrambled to my feet, my heart still pounding, my mind reeling from the horror of what had just happened. I stumbled back upstairs, my legs shaking under me. I had to get out of there, had to put as much distance between myself and that creature as possible. I burst through the front doors and into the night, not stopping until I was several blocks away. I looked back at the abandoned hospital, its dark silhouette looming ominously against the night sky. I knew I would never forget what had happened there, would never be able to shake the memory of that emaciated creature and its inhuman scream. As I walked away, I swore to myself that I would never return to that place. But even as I made the promise, I knew deep down that the shadows of the abandoned hospital would forever haunt my dreams. In the days that followed, I tried to put the incident behind me. I told myself it was just a hallucination, a figment of my overactive imagination. But the memories were too vivid, too real to be dismissed so easily. I found myself constantly looking over my shoulder, afraid that the creature from the hospital was following me, waiting for an opportunity to strike again. I slept with the lights on, my room filled with the comforting glow of the television and the reassuring buzz of the refrigerator. But even in the safety of my own home, I could not escape the shadows of the abandoned hospital. They crept into my dreams, twisting and contorting into nightmares that left me waking in a cold sweat. my heart pounding in my chest. I knew I had to do something, had to find a way to exorcise these demons once and for all. So I did the only thing I could think of. I went back to the hospital. It was broad daylight when I arrived, the sun shining brightly in the clear blue sky. The hospital looked different in the light of day, less foreboding and more just sad and neglected. I forced myself to walk through the front doors and into the building, my heart hammering in my chest. I followed the same path I had taken on my previous visit, down the hallway and into the basement. But this time, there was no sign of the creature. The basement was empty, the beds abandoned and covered in dust. I felt a sense of relief wash over me, but it was quickly replaced by a deep sense of unease. I knew the creature was still there, lurking in the shadows, waiting for the right moment to strike. I searched the hospital thoroughly, but there was no sign of the creature anywhere. I even ventured into the attic, climbing through a narrow hatch and into the dusty, cobweb-filled space. But there was nothing there either, just old furniture and piles of discarded medical equipment. I was about to give up when I heard it again. The low, moaning sound, coming from somewhere deep within the bowels of the hospital. I followed the sound, tracing it to a small, windowless room at the end of a long corridor. The door was locked, but I managed to force it open with a little effort. The room was dark, the only light coming from a narrow slit in the door. I could make out the shape of a hospital bed in the center of the room, and as my eyes adjusted to the darkness, I saw that it was occupied by a woman. She was emaciated, her skin stretched tightly over her bony limbs. Her hair was long and matted, hanging limply around her face. She was staring blankly at the ceiling, her eyes sunken and milky white. I gasped, my hand flying to my mouth in horror. It was the creature from the basement. But it was no longer a creature. It was a woman, a patient who had been left to rot in this godforsaken place. I stumbled backward, my mind reeling from the revelation. I had to get out of there, had to find someone who could help this woman. But as I turned to leave, I saw something else in the room, a mirror. It was hanging on the wall opposite the bed, reflecting the image of the emaciated woman. But as I looked closer, I realized that it wasn't reflecting her at all. It was reflecting something else entirely. My own face, gaunt and haggard, my eyes sunken and milky white. I was staring at my own reflection, but I was seeing the face of a dead woman. I screamed and stumbled backward, tripping over my own feet and falling to the floor. The impact jarred me out of my stupor, and I scrambled to my feet, my heart pounding in my chest. I staggered out of the room and down the corridor, my mind reeling from what I had seen. I had to get out of there, had to put as much distance between myself and that place as possible. I burst through the front doors and into the sunlight, not stopping until I was several blocks away. I looked back at the abandoned hospital, its dark silhouette looming ominously against the sky. I knew then that I would never forget what I had seen, would never be able to shake the memory of that emaciated woman and her milky white eyes. But more importantly, I knew that I had to tell someone. Had to make sure that what had happened to her never happened again. So I did. I told the authorities what I had found, and they launched an investigation into the abandoned hospital. It turned out that the woman had been a patient there for years, neglected and forgotten by the staff. She had died of natural causes, but her body had been left to rot in that godforsaken place. The hospital was shut down, and the remaining patients were transferred to better facilities. But the memory of what I had seen there would forever haunt me, a reminder of the horrors that lurk in the shadows of society's forgotten corners.